Hello, welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. In a bid to smoothen its strategic divestment process, the government has changed the definition of a government company with respect to the minimum 51% shareholding. Not just that, the government has also eased the 25% minimum public shareholding norm for any listed centre, state or public sector unit. Sapna Das joins us to explain what these changes really mean. Sapna, give us a sense on how these exemptions have been extended now.
I think the government has changed the rules in terms of a lot of CPSEs and PSBs meeting that 25% minimum public shareholding norm, keeping two things in mind. Number one, an overall exemption, or rather an extension of exemption, is required, for some CPSEs and PSBs at least, where the public float is very low at the moment. That's one. Second, of course, in terms of meeting the strategic disinvestment goal. Here again, those companies which are to be privatized and where the public float is quite low at the moment, I think also trying to give them some kind of a comfort, or rather a message to the potential suitors. For example, IDBI Bank could be a fit case. Public float is somewhere around 6-odd%. Even after change in management, the bank is under a strategic disinvestment process at the moment. So even once it's privatized and change of management takes place, it will be difficult for the new promoter to just step up the MPS from the current 6% to 25-odd%. Hence, the dispensation for exemption will also apply to those companies which are being privatized. And the government will specifically notify the deadline for that extension of exemption. We are given to understand that probably they're mulling on a 2-year extension. So, that will come through at some point in time, and this is the overall aim. The overall aim is to give comfort to those CPSEs and PSBs which have yet to meet the MPS norms of 25-odd%, and also to facilitate strategic disinvestment. This is removal of another regulatory hurdle as far as the strategic stake sales are concerned.
All right, thanks very much for explaining that notification to us, Sapna. Joining us now to take this forward is JN Gupta, former ED of SEBI, and Subhash Chandra Garg, the former Secretary of Finance at the Finance Ministry. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Garg, if I can begin with you, this comes at a crucial time when the roadshows for IDBI stake sale are complete. We have got feedback from investors. The expression of interest is likely to be issued this month, and we want to complete this process by this fiscal. How important is this for IDBI?
See, Parikshit, the government had assumed this power in 21 to exempt any public sector entity from the minimum public shareholding norms, which is 25% for everyone else. Now, what they have done is that they have sort of expanded the scope of this power by also empowering the government to exempt any entity which is not a public sector entity, so to say, but where the government, central government, state government, or the public sector entities together hold more than 50% of the shareholding or have control. So this brings in the companies or entities like IDBI Bank within the scope of the government's power to exempt. And interestingly, the government has also additionally made a provision in the notification that if you grant such an exemption for a specified period, then that exemption will carry even if the entity is privatized. So clearly this is aimed at the IDBI Bank. Now, to answer your question whether it makes it interesting for the IDBI Bank to be privatized, surely, as you see, there are several exemptions, special dispensation which have been given or are required to be given from the RBI and the government, and this one is a smaller addition in that. I don't think this increases the attractiveness of that too much, but certainly it makes a little bit of a difference.
All right. Mr. Gupta, if I can get you in, how important was this for helping IDBI realize better valuations, according to you?
See, I would not be able to comment whether IDBI will realize a better valuation or not, and whether it is for IDBI or for some other thing. I would say, let us understand from the perspective of a private investor or private individual or company who wants to buy out a government company. And if immediately after buying out, it is said that you got to comply with all these norms, it becomes a difficult, and that is why the attractiveness of divestment process is not there. Say, for example, in IDBI, suppose the investor were to purchase, say, 40, 50, whatever percentage of equity. Now, with the balance equity with LIC and government is still remaining, probably it would happen because these companies will continue to be promoter unless until they depromoterize, and then it will happen the 75% plus equity is with the promoters. Then there will be requirement to offload the equity which has been available after open offer, because open offer will have to be made unless you exempt the open offer. That is one part. But the second part, which is very important, is this. I want to know what is the logic behind minimum 25% public shareholding. As far as I understand, there are two rationale for which 25% holding is mandated in the public. One is that the promoter or the person in control should not be able to pass all the resolution, including a special resolution. So in order not to give power to pass a special resolution by their own, it is provided. The second objective is liquidity. Now, with the voting of public so low, the 75%, even if it is 75%, there is a power available in most of the companies with the promoters to pass this. So that objective has failed. That is one. Second part is the liquidity part. Liquidity is not a function of percentage. It is a function of number of shares that are with the public. And even if there is a large number of shares are with the public, institutions like LIC or banks or some FIIs, they keep on holding and sticking to their investment for 25 years or something like this. Because LIC, if they are holding a share, they do not sell on a daily basis. So those public shareholders who are long-term investors really do not contribute to the liquidity. So we will have to look into holistic manner. And I would say no law is cast in stone like Taj Mahal or Qutub Minar that it should not be changed. Let us always look into the objective for which law is made, whether that objective is being serviced or not. If not serviced, what to do, how to make it more attractive. And secondly, let us say that we are all part of the process or this country. If divestment is good for health of the economy or for making that entity which is being divested healthy, then if something is done for that objective, which is applicable to all, not selective. If it was to say it is available only to IDBI or shipping corporation or any company, probably it would be bad. But if it is applied universally to all with a logic, I don't think any issue is there.
Right. Mr. Garg, to get you back in, do you feel this will help the government in its privatization drive, in divesting stake in other companies, in other public sector banks as well?
See, the privatization requires government to shed more than 50% shareholding. But we have not been doing privatization. We've been doing more of the disinvestment by small stake sales, like we did for the LIC. There also these exemptions have been taken, but LIC was a PSU, so the notification allowed the government to do it straight away. The real effect of today's notification is only to bring in within the scope those entities which are not government companies or which are not PSUs. That is and if you look at what these companies are, from the disinvestment perspective, there are very few, IDBI being the one. You can have some of these entities which are owned by the PSUs, like the steel, in the steel sector, there are some companies. So it's very difficult to say that there is any causative or direct relationship between the disinvestment effort and this exemption. I find this is because public shareholding is a public good kind of notion that in companies the public should hold more of the shares. That is why the government brought it in 2010, these requirements of minimum public shareholdings. At that time, for the public sector companies, the requirement was only 10%. It was raised to 25% in 2014 by the same government, thinking that the public shareholding, more and more of it, at least 25%, is a good idea. Now, if you have not been able to get the public sector entities to offload 25% to the public, whether it is banks or others, then that objective is in a way defeated. Now, to make the disinvestment of the IDBI possible, you make this kind of numerous exemptions and special dispensations, I said. So I don't think it is going to improve the disinvestment attractiveness in general. It may facilitate a specific entity's disinvestment or privatization, but not in general.
Right. Mr. Gupta, if I can get you in the absence of this exemption, IDBI Bank, after the strategic investment, would have to comply with the public shareholding norm of 25% within 3 years of being listed. Now, the exemption time period is not mentioned in this latest notification, but according to some reports, it could be an additional 2 years, a total of 5 years that could be granted. What is your view on how long this exemption period could be?
See, I tell you, the issue is very simply that we do not know what would be the situation on the ground when things happen. Now, when you have an institution like a bank, when it changes from a public sector color to a private sector, it takes a lot of time to get into a shape. Because when the private sector entity comes, then it has to work to get the faith of the depositors and all the things, because immediately what will happen, the IDBI, at present the depositors are there because they think it is a government bank. Now when you privatize, that notion will change. So this bank will have to do a lot of work to stabilize. So I would say, because if you look at the Reserve Bank guidelines permit a banker, a company to start a bank or an individual to start a bank and dilute in the period of 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it may be, I don't remember the thing. So that is the time where it says that you are in a position to stabilize the bank and make your bank acceptable and successful. What happens if today you privatize this IDBI or any other institution and you say that you further dilute? By the time you have not been able to create a position for yourself in the market, neither the valuation will be there, nor there will be buyers. So what will happen? It will be some sort of a forced sale. So that right at the beginning, if I have to say that I will have to buy this bank and then dilute within 3 years or 5 years, probably I will not be willing, because I do not know how much time I will take to realize the value which I am looking. So these are the things which I and you cannot decide in TV studio. These are the hard numbers which people will have to work. So I would say the flexibility must be there. And this is what government has done. And again, I would say it should not be to a specific case. If a thing has been done with a rationale, it must apply to all companies, not to one company. And I again quote that 25%, suppose the market cap is 100 crore, 25% is 25 crore. But a market cap is 5 lakh crore, 25% is 1,25,000 crore. So there is a difference. So one doesn't have to look into the percentage alone. You got to look into the absolute number as well.
Right. Mr. Garg, from your experience in the finance ministry, give us the thinking within the government. There have been a lot of deliberations with investors, roadshows have happened. And as Mr. Gupta is saying, this should not be only for one particular case. we must apply this to all companies. What kind of precedent does this set when it comes to showing flexibility in such regulations?
See, when this notification was, the regulation was amended in 2021, giving the government the power to exempt any public sector entity from the minimum public sector holding, the government brought in the flexibility for all the public sector entities in any case. That is where the divestment takes place or the privatization takes place. IDBI is a very particular case where it's not a public sector entity, it's not a government company, it's actually, its legal character today is a private company. And therefore, to bring this into the scope of the government's power, the construct is that if the government or the state government or the public sector together hold more than 50% share, you can exempt. So it's been designed specifically for a very few cases. I can't recall at this moment many such cases where this kind of requirement would be there. Moreover, as Mr. Gupta was also saying the other side, in fact, there is a notion, there is a public requirement that any individual should not actually hold more than 25% share in any banking company. That's the RBI's requirement as well. Even there, the exemptions and the special dispensation are being provided to IDBI that you can dilute it over a certain period of time. So for both sides, that all right, you can hold your individual shares much larger, and you don't have to meet the MPS or the minimum public shareholding requirement. This is an attempt that you can attract the bidders for a bank like IDBI.
Right. And my final question, sir, considering the exemption period, there will be a separate notification for that, possibly for IDBI Bank. But do you feel that the government will now have that flexibility of maybe coming out with different exemption periods in different cases, depending on the conversation, negotiations that they have with potential investors?
Yes, that's true. That's the whole purpose of this notification. And making a provision that you can specify the period, and then you can also extend that even after it is privatized, for a certain period, that exemption will continue for the private sector entity also. So that's precisely the objective.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Garg and Mr. Gupta, for joining us on this broadcast, explaining us the importance of this notification, why it's important in the case of IDBI, why the government was trying to improve the valuations for IDBI Bank. And this comes at a critical time when we are going to see an EOI going to be issued by the Finance Ministry, and the government is hoping to complete this stake sale as soon as possible. Thanks once again, Mr. JN Gupta and Mr. Garg, for being with us here on News Center. We're heading into a short break, but up next, the Commerce and Industries Minister Piyush Goyal held a meeting with major players from the automobile industry to discuss standards of battery swapping. Where does this policy stand? Remember, this was a budget announcement last year by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. What is happening currently? Where is there lack of consensus on policy? We're going to get you a special interview with Chetan Maini of Sun Mobility when we're back.